I say the ancient words from Psalm 16. I have set the eternal always before me. That which is eternal is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. I sing the song in the ancient language. Shiviti Adonai leneged tamid ki mimini bal yehemot לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי אף בשרי ישכון לבטח כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשוב לא תיתן חסידך לראות שחט תודיעני אור החיים אור החיים צבא שמחות את פניך נמות בימינך נצח שביתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד כי ממני בא
Our rabbis taught that there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasized that the crown of a good name exceeds them all. The book of Ecclesiastes says, Tov Shem Mishem and Tov. A good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Wealth, health, even life passes away, but a good name lives forever. It is this view that the Talmud teaches: monuments need not be erected for the righteous. Their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown and for the love they have given. They are shining examples of what it means to be a mensch.
People at the back would care, they can come and sit up here. The Eternal One is my shepherd. I shall not want. The Eternal makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Goodness, mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. Adonai roi lo echsar, binot asher yarbitzeni, al me menuchot, ינעלני. נפשי ישובב, ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בצל המוות, לא יירא רע כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. דהרוך לפנה, שולחן נגד צוררה, נשענתה בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב והחסד ירדפוני, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. אדוני רואי
Shalom and Bruchim Habaim. A welcome and a blessing to all of you who are joining us today. My name is Alan Finkel. I'm the rabbi and spiritual leader at Temple Shalom. And with me is Len Udo, the cantor at Temple Shalom. And we are honored to lead this service on behalf of the family as we honor the passing of Melech ben Noach Veriva Rezel, Mitch Podolak, the son of Nathan and Rhoda, who we all simply know as Mitch, who left us this past Sunday, August 25th, 2019, the 24th day of Av, 5779 in the Hebrew calendar at the age of 71. His passing has left a huge hole in his family and this community, the word community expressed in its most broadest sense, geographically Winnipeg in Canada, and in so many other communities, artists and musicians, volunteers, festivals and community organizations, and friends, and more friends. Mitch was predeceased by his parents, Nathan and Rhoda, and is survived by his sister, Alice, and husband, Bill, his brother, Mark, and wife, Harriet. Mitch also leaves behind his wife and closest friend, Ava, his son, Leonard, and daughter-in-law, Erna, and there's two granddaughters, Aya and Hannah, as well as Max and Zeke, who became sons to Mitch and Ava and brothers to Leonard in their teens, after the untimely passing of their mother and close friend, Dory Preston. Also mourning Mitch's loss are Max's partner, Beth Ann, and his son, Levi, as well as Mitch's nieces and nephews, Rachel, Simon, and Ben, and Kimberly and Stephanie and their families, and Ava's sisters, Lila, Ina, Nora, and their families. And the list doesn't stop here, as we, his many friends here today and around the world, are all pausing today to both mourn his loss and to celebrate the gifts that Mitch brought into our lives simply because of who he was. Mitch was many things to us: a son, brother, a husband, father, and grandfather, a friend, a storyteller and a mentor, a musician and an advocate for musicians, a teacher, an inspiration, and a creator of lasting communities. Mitch's impact in this world has been huge, and the family notes that as of yesterday afternoon, there were over 600 tributes on social media that mirror the many stories that we could each share today about that extraordinary, larger than life guy. Some funny, some remarkable, some poignant, but all heartfelt and all full of gratitude for Mitch being a part of their lives. I want you to know that the family has been reading your tributes with deep gratitude and appreciation, and that today we have chosen to spend less time on the public Mitch that we have all come to know, but instead to provide a more intimate portrayal of Mitch from the perspective of those who knew him best. I want to express my appreciation for the many hours that Len and I spent yesterday with Ava, Leonard, Zeke, and Max, and the wonderful stories they told about Mitch. And I will share with you on their behalf stories told with a smile and often a laugh, a number of them censored and possibly illegal, uh, that we left on the cutting room floor. Uh, Mitch was born in 1947 in Toronto into a traditional Jewish home with no religious exposure, but it was a kosher home. He was the youngest of three children. His family was profoundly affected by the Holocaust, as his father had emigrated to Canada before World War II and later found out that his parents had perished, a huge loss that was very present in their household. And at age 9, Mitch suffered a huge loss himself, the death of his father, which Mitch's sister Alice and Mitch's son Leonard separately both described as a turning point in his life, a sense of a huge injustice that had been perpetrated and that he felt deeply. And his energy changed course at that moment. He rebelled, his attitudes towards schools changed, scoring 100s in high school history and zeros everywhere else. What a surprise. He was tested. He was found to be a genius level, but school was not his path, and he left at 16 when he could legally do so. And so he found new passions along the way. A Pete Seeger's concert at age 13 at Massey Hall with his older sister Alice, and he found folk music driven by social purpose. And through newfound friendships with Harry Payne and Joe Flexier, Mitch declared himself as a communist and started to change the world. First in Toronto, as he told me many years ago, as a rabble rouser. And he deepened his ties to folk music when he started to work at Bohemian Rhapsody, the folk club in Toronto, first as a busboy, and soon enough rising to become their artistic director. Mitch's life would take a major turn in January 1971. Ava Kabrinsky, a Winnipegger, had graduated from education and took a temporary job in Toronto. And she met a guy who told her about an organization he was involved in, the League for Social Action, also known as the Young Trotskyites. Ava was all in on the idea and went to a movie night at their Queen Street Hall, and Mitch was there, and her interest was piqued. She kind of hunted him down later that evening at a friend's house, and they started talking. They met again and went to a horror show, and at a scary moment, she grabbed his shirt, like really grabbed his shirt, and all of his shirt buttons popped off. Uh, it worked. They moved in a month later. I asked Ava about what initially attracted her to Mitch, and she paused and said, his black hair and his black beard. And I forgot to ask Ava if Mitch was wearing a black t-shirt. Yes, no, he was. Quite soon after, the idea of marriage came up. Mitch, as a communist, felt marriage was a state institution meant to enslave people. Ava was more practical. Mitch, if we get married, my parents will get me a car. They needed a car. They got married, and they got a car. Ava apparently wanted a Datsun, but they had to settle for a Toyota. But Ava got a car, and she got a husband as an accessory. 4 years later, Leonard arrived, and he describes Mitch as a dream dad in a lot of ways. Lots of fishing, jet games. He was very present in a lot of ways, well, except around folk festival time. He found ways to make fun for Leonard and even became his hockey coach, which Leonard describes was sort of hilarious because Mitch didn't know how to skate. But as Len says, he was good at telling people what to do. Well, that's a surprise. And Ava talks about when she was pregnant and how attentive Mitch was, making sure that she had a good breakfast every morning. Cottage cheese and salad. Not exactly the food groups we would normally associate with Mitch. Rich Riley noted in his case, Mitch was giving him at the age 2 cans of Coke. And at age 3, Mitch was teaching him Trotsky's Red Army and had him marching around the table with his arm raised in salute. The indoctrination started early. And then there were the shared stories of the past that brought Zeke and Max Preston into their home, with their mother Dory's worsening illness, and Leonard first making the suggestion, and then Mitch and Ava simply knowing that it was the right thing to do. And so it was done. Leonard gaining 2 brothers, so close to this very day, and Mitch and Ava now a family of 5. And wherever they lived, in the houses in Wolseley and Crescentwood, the huge meals and the huge gatherings, the door was always open and inviting. Mitch in charge of the cooking and the Saturday morning food tours to stock the larders for the week ahead. Mitch's arrival to Winnipeg in early 1972 brought him into our lives for the first time. And this is the Mitch that most of us know, and it was almost by accident. Ava talks about an ad that she saw on their black and white TV one day as they were heading out the door about the upcoming Winnipeg Centennial Year, and they were looking for projects to fund. Ava mentioned it to Mitch in passing, and he replied, "Oh, we should make a folk festival." Ava's reply was, "What's a folk festival?" And so it began, rechanneling all that energy, the right stage at the right time for Mitch, a huge platform to advocate for social change through music, introducing to us, for the first time, to his strange, mad genius, combined with a chutzpah that would change the landscapes of our communities. Mitch created sparks everywhere he went, sparks of creation, a brilliant mind pushing forward and pushing hard, fired by fiercely held political beliefs and a passion for folk music in his youth that convinced him that he could change the world, make it a better place, by creating real social change through transformative community experiences. Magic in a bottle that brought life to the Winnipeg Folk Festival, the West End Cultural Centre, and to Home Roots, each so different, but each so indelibly etched with Mitch's personal values. I first met Mitch 40 years ago as a first-time volunteer with the Winnipeg Folk Festival at our Gate Crew t-shirt meeting, and recall being mesmerized by him talking about what volunteerism really meant, and about the community that he was creating of shared experiences between audiences, volunteers, and musicians, where the lines between each were intentionally blurred for the synergies that would be created. Mitch told us that we were the most important volunteers at the festival. I told Ava the story, and she told me that Mitch told that to every volunteer crew, but that he was right. Every crew was the most important, for without that crew, there would be no Winnipeg Folk Festival. Mitch's concepts were brilliant and dramatically changed the experience of folk music and folk festivals in Canada as he exported and shared his passion and enthusiasm and knowledge with anyone who would listen, and even if they didn't want to listen. And to show up at Birdsville Park today as an audience member, or a volunteer, or as a performer, to step onto the land that Mitch found and mapped out, we will always feel his influence resonating around us decades after he stepped away as artistic director. These were lessons about volunteerism that I would take with me into my own life and my own careers in nonprofit organizations. And much as he shaped me, he shaped thousands and thousands of others, instilling and inspiring in us the importance of being part of something bigger than ourselves, of giving time to issues and events and causes that really matter, simply because it is the right thing to do. Mitch wasn't always easy. He poked and he prodded, sometimes quietly, and more often, very loudly, against establishments and norms, political and otherwise, that preferred to say no to his latest ventures. But there was always a twinkle in his eye, always a sense that he saw a bigger picture. And what I always really admired about Mitch is that he didn't take it personally if people said no or if they got angry with him, because Mitch knew he was being heard, and that was what mattered, because he was fueled by a deep social conscience, a sense that it was always about trying to do good things for the world. Mitch was expressing in his own way profoundly Jewish ideals of tikkun olam, our responsibility to repair the world, and by his example to bring people along with him for the ride. The same kind of zeal that drove other Jewish social activists that he admired, Karl Marx, Leon Trotsky, amongst others. And Mitch certainly brought us all along on his journey. And even as he pushed, it was apparent that he loved and had extraordinary tolerance for those on his path. Every volunteer, musician, and audience member, every community organization and politician who gave him the time of day, every friend. He gave us room to be ourselves, but also showed us our capacity to grow and be the best of ourselves as well. Max yesterday noted, and his family agreed, that loyalty was the most important value in family, and fierce loyalty was a hallmark characteristic of Mitch's many close friends. Our conversations yesterday touched into Mitch's relationship with Judaism. His family all described it as fiercely and proudly Jewish, and he felt very strong ties to the history of the people from whom he came. But he also understood that he was expressing it in a different way, not through religion, for he was an atheist, but by the profoundly Jewish values that drove his life's work. There was a funny moment when Ava and the boys looked at each other, and Ava said, "Oh my, I guess we're saying that Mitch is a good Jew." What would he think of that? And they laughed, and they figured it would be just fine. And they also agreed that if Mitch was present at that moment, he would have been thrilled to see, in his absence, how close and how loving they were with each other as a family in the den that we were meeting in. I do want to touch on Mitch's last days, as it became known that the end was near. Fathers and sons are not always easy, and so it was in the Podolak home growing up. But it was the banjo, Mitch's instrument, that created bridges, as Zeke, and then Leonard, and then Max all took up Mitch's instrument, and it created common language and shared experiences. Ava notes that Mitch had a sense of completion in seeing his kids take up that path all on their own. Music became the language of those last days, this past weekend, as family and friends gathered, and on Sunday, when Leonard invited close friends to the hospital, and in the company of a banjo, a guitar, and a bass, they played Mitch some tunes, until finally later, Leonard, singing alone in the presence of his family, sang Bright Morning Star, after which Mitch took his final breath. Judaism doesn't have a specific sense of what happens next, with many writers offering different understandings, and yesterday Leonard offered his own interpretation, saying, "I believe in folk heaven. I'm sure that's where Dad is." And with those words, my last words. Mitch, you will be hugely missed and always loved. May your name always be for a blessing. Can you hear what's on? May it be so.
Thank you very. I'm a little bit taller. Thank you very much for that lovely eulogy. I agree with every bit of it. So my dad used to drive Zeke and myself to school every day. He'd drive, and in 12th grade he drove Zeke to Argyle and then me to Kelvin. And every single day I was about 7 to 10 minutes late, and I often show up during the singing of "O Canada." And one day I finally got fed up, and I said, "Well, that's enough of that." I just kept on walking to my locker, and I walked right past the vice principal, and I walked right past a bunch of teachers, and I just quietly opened my locker to get my books. But when the song was over, I was surrounded by this vice principal and the teachers, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, Canada. You stand for Oh Canada." And I said, "Oh yeah, well, I come to school to learn the curriculum, and I'm kind of fed up with all this nationalism. I'm not really up for it anymore." And then she said, "To my office right now." And we sat there, and she said, "Leonard," and she was chewing gum, "if you continue this behavior, I'll be forced to phone your father." And I said, "Oh yeah, Mrs. Wozniak, tell you what, why don't you hand me the phone? I would love to dial." And then she took a pause and said, "You don't think that I should do that?" And I said, "Well, if you call him and you tell him you want to talk to him about my math score, he'll hear you out. But if you're calling him to tell on me about not standing for O Canada, I don't think that's the thing to do." But um, yeah, there's a lot that we covered yesterday with Alan and Len that I feel like I actually grew a lot because I learned a lot. In reading all in preparing for this, I didn't know how you prepare for a memorial for Mitch Podolak in 2 days. He told me that he wanted me to take a good amount of time to prepare for his friends to come, and an unbelievable, you all came anyway. But what I really came to yesterday was realizing that this is in fact my father's funeral, and he gathered us all here today just like the way he's been for 50 years, and that means so much to our family. It was a crazy. He was a complicated fella. He was amazing. Like all my friends and people who weren't my friends at school wanted to come to my birthday parties. It was an unbelievable amount of fun as a kid. I There were so many times when he would say, "Leonard, you're not sleeping in your room today." Somebody like, I don't know, it could be anybody. Stephen Fearing, Stan Rogers, James Keelahan, all the people that provided the soundtrack for my life. I had the folk festival every day, and I lived backstage, and I still do. Um, I was gonna make notes. I talked to Marcy Marcusa, and I feel like in a way the radio interview was my eulogy to my father, because it was so soon after he died. I didn't have time to really process it, and I could just ad lib. And so Len told me I should make some notes for what I was going to say. But then I had this huge page of notes, and I was like, I don't know. But he loved my mother, and my mother loved him, and there were people that would come to the house and feel like maybe they were witnessing the end. But it was that passion that they both shared, um, that affected everything they did, including their marriage and including our life at home. Um, he was so passionate and so strong in his beliefs, and sometimes I just wished he was could be a normal dad and do do things, not always try to make a big stink. Um, Everything changed for my dad. I think the most cataclysmic event in his life was the death of Stan Rogers. And I don't think I told him, I said, I didn't know it was the last time I was going to talk to him in person, but he was in rough shape in the hospital. And we had this rare moment where we were together and we started talking about the festival, which he was very conflicted about. Um, and I said, I don't think you would have quit if Stan hadn't died, because he wouldn't have let you. And he was frustrated because he had 3 or 4 years of 3 days of rain. And it was just so hard to prepare all year and have it all just get rained on. but Stan, uh, he wasn't just an amazing songwriter to my dad. My dad thought he was the best songwriter in the world, of course, but he was a mentor to my dad too, and a partner, and a schemer, just the same. And my dad leaned on him a lot. And after he passed away, it it was like the earth shifted. And he was honored to invite Nathan to come to Winnipeg and join our family. And we were all honored to get to know him, and all the and he admired Nathan's chaos. He, very much in those early years, and he respected it, and he respected the the lack of who cares of it all. You only live once, and I got to. Well, I'm trying not to talk about myself too much, but there's so much of me that is from my dad. We're on the main stage of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, and I look over and with Nathan and JD, and we had a wireless mic, and I was like, oh, and Nathan ripped off his shirt in front of 10,000 people and jumped onto the bass speakers, and that was the kind of stuff that my dad loved. One time, Loudon Wainwright III, he wrote some kind of song that he didn't introduce correctly, and then there were feminist protesters with picket signs at his workshops, the Winnipeg Folk Festival, the next day, and that followed Loudon to the Vancouver Folk Festival too the next week. But that was also the kind of chaos that my dad loved. The first year of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, there was a person smoking a joint in the middle, and a poor police officer attempted to go arrest the guy. that fella, his name was Ron Lowe. He was surrounded by the audience, and my dad went in there and rescued him. And they became good buds, and Ron became the head of security. They weren't called security; they were called staff, because my dad didn't want to be called security. I remember the staff. They had these big, high mounted chairs that looked the opposite direction of the folk festival, and I always thought to myself, I'm glad I'm not one of them. Yeah, I didn't make notes, so I'm honestly just making this up as I'm going along. But reading the tributes in the last couple of days, somebody said today, "Oh, he would have been so embarrassed." I wrote back, "Embarrassed? What are you talking about? He'd revel in it." And I've been reveling in it too. It's been a huge source of strength in the last few days. He had a whole bunch of the list of diagnoses my father had would take a long time to get through, but it was still an incredible shock to us. We weren't expecting him to pass away. thought he was going to walk again. And seeing that man hike up his pants and go to it across the field, he was so strong. And he really hated being in the wheelchair. It wasn't him. And he's free now. He's free of the wheelchair. He's free of capitalism. And he's planning with Stan. He's planning a workshop with Stan. And our good friend Eileen Carson from the Fiddle Puppet Dancers, who passed away a couple weeks ago, who was my hero, who Mitch brought to Winnipeg many times, the Greengrass Cloggers and the Fiddle Puppets and Footworks. And she was, along with a group called Oyster Band, were the ones that made me realize what was right under my nose was the most amazing thing. And because when I was a kid, it was just a fun place to go and play soccer and listen to music in the background. And it was all folk music. I didn't know the difference between blues and Scottish music and Irish music and this and that. It was just my parents' music. And even though I used to sing "Tay the Weavers Gin Ya Gang" in a Scottish accent when I was 3, I was a folkie the whole time, but I just didn't know it. But he loved all of you so much. He loved all of you, so he really, truly, truly did. And he loved the community here. And he loved his family. He loved us so much. And we loved him. And we love him, and we're going to love him forever. And I asked Alan and Len if it would be okay if we sang a little bit of Southern gospel in the synagogue for my dad's funeral. And they agreed. So I'm going to sing a song from the Red Clay Ramblers. I know I forgot to mention a whole bunch. I want to talk just really quickly about Zeke and Max and how you fellas made our family whole, and how much better it made it for me. Because even though all the amazing things, my folks were extremely occupied, and it was great to have some brothers. And I had so much fun with you, and I have so much fun with you. And it's funny that we're adults now. We used to be kids. We have kids now. And my dad has loved you, Levi, very much. And he loved his granddaughters. And he got to hold his new granddaughter, Hannah, once. But the family was huge, and I want to just express my gratitude to you guys joining our family. Thank you all so much. There's going to be a rip-roaring party sometime in the future that's going to have music and stories from everybody. I wish that you could all tell your stories here, because I just looking at everyone in the room, I know you have so many, and the contributions that you all made to the Winnipeg Folk Festival and to the West End Cultural Center and to anything that my dad ever did. And my ma too. I got to talk about my ma a little bit. I'm sorry, it's his funeral, but he didn't do anything without her. Nothing, actually. And I feel really lucky that I have her as a mentor now that I step into his shoes at Home Roots. And I told her that she's allowed to edit any bit of my writing and do whatever she wants, and that she's the boss. She's the most incredible woman and human being walking the planet, in my opinion. And I feel so grateful to have been brought up by Ava Kobrinsky and Mitch Podolak. And so now I'm going to sing, and then the next thing will happen. The chorus goes, I'm a long time traveling here below. I'm a long time traveling away from home. I'm a long time traveling here below to lay this body down. The melody is very easy, and I would love it if you would join me in the chorus. And those of you who do know the song, you're my shills. Ye fleeting charms of earth, farewell, your springs of joy are dry. My soul now seeks another home, a brighter world on high. I'm a long time traveling here below. I'm a long time traveling away from home. I'm a long time traveling here below to lay this body down. One more time, come on. I'm a long time traveling here below. I'm a long time traveling away from home. I'm a long time traveling here below to lay this body down. Farewell, kind friends whose tender care has long engaged my love. Your fond embrace I now exchange for better friends above. I'm a long time traveling here below. I'm a long time traveling away from home. I'm a long time traveling here below to lay this body down.
I'll invite Leonard.
Although I wear one hat today, I wear a lot of hats, especially when it comes to Winnipeg, and especially when it comes to Toronto. I've had two homes in my life. I visit Toronto a great many times in my adult life. I lived there and was educated there. I went to have a music career. I went to have a manager and the road to something that had to do with music, but had more to do with life. So, as one of my favorite expressions is these days, that there are no coincidences. It's only God's way of remaining anonymous. Mitch has brought me to the funeral home of my childhood, where my grandparents and my parents had their funeral services, where we said our goodbyes, where we wept, where we thought of our own mortalities and those of all those that we love, when we thought of life as a passage and as a journey. And Leonard was right. It was all based on some kind of love for this life. Where to go, how to go, what were the messages that were going to help us to travel. I bought this guitar with my father's help in 1961 from a pawn shop on Main Street. And in 1963, I was 18, almost 18. I left to go on this musical journey that seemed to be calling to me. And I ended up in the big city of Toronto, Toronto the Good. And it was quite a shock to be there, to bring my music there. Bruce Cockburn wrote that he didn't want Toronto to take his music away. And I suppose you could look at the city in total. But what happened to me was this lovely event. This wonderful person came out of an audience where I was performing. Mitch Podolak. He was a little younger than I was. And he talked about this coffee house that was once called the Bohemian Embassy, and how he used to get phone calls asking for visas. And he thought that was the funniest thing, that he was the ambassador of Bohemia. So we quickly discovered two Jewish kids, love of folk music. We knew the world was calling. Where was it calling us? And typical of Jewish immigrants and that value system that they brought, we helped each other out. So he knew I needed a gig. So he got me a gig. He knew I needed a meal. That was the first thing, actually. He invited me home to meet his mother. And they discussed what they were going to have for dinner. And I was remembering this because he insisted that it had to be steak. Wow, steak. I think I was eating a lot of peanut butter sandwiches in those days. And then Mitch turned out to be here in Winnipeg and starting the festival, and I was on a big stage, and there were hundreds, maybe thousands of people that I was singing to, and then he started all the other festivals that we started to get identified with. And then I realized his home was here in Winnipeg. What I did not realize is that when he was young, he went to the Massey Hall, wonderful concert hall in Toronto, and he heard the wonderful Pete Seeger play his banjo, tell his stories, get us all singing. Well, I was the kid, coincidentally, who was at the Playhouse Theater, up in the nosebleed section, marveling at Pete Seeger, that little man down at the bottom of the stage there. And he had us singing everything, and the stories, and the musicality, and the world seemed to open up. And I think for Mitch as well. And one of the songs that came out of an interview with Marcy and Leonard was this revelation, I think, which is based on a poem by Idris Davies, a Welsh poet, who tried to look at the harsh life of the miner and ask some basic questions about the resources that we mine, that we take out of the earth, and how do we share that wealth. And that's what struck me when I first heard this song when I was very young. I can't sing it anymore in the key of D. I used to be a boy soprano, and so now I have to sing it very low. The Bells of Rumney, Pete Seeger, Massey Hall, Pantages Theater, 1962. what will you give me? Say the sad bells of Romney. Is there hope for the future? Cry the brown bells of Merthyr. Who made the mine owner? Cry the black bells of Rhonda. Who robbed the miner? Cry the grim bells of Blythe. They will plunder willy-nilly. Cry the bells of Caerphilly. They have fangs, they have teeth. Shout the loud bells of Neath. Even God is uneasy. Say the moist bells of Swansea. And what will you give me? Say the sad bells of Rumney. Throw the vandals in court. Cry the bells of Newport. All will be well if cry the green bells of Cardiff. Why so worried, sisters, why? Sang the silver bells of wine. And what will you give me? Say the sad bells of rum.
We're approaching the end of the service, and I just want to explain what will be happening next. We'll be concluding the service with the El Male Rachamim, a traditional melody, which is part of every Jewish funeral. Afterwards, you'll be standing for that, and afterwards I'll ask you to remain standing, and we'll be asking at that time for the pallbearers to come to the front and to take their places. At that point, the pallbearers will leave down the center hall. The family will follow. We'd ask you simply to leave row by row from the front forward. The family and the hearse will be going directly to the Temple Shalom Cemetery, which is a chapel lawn. The location is 4000 Portage Avenue, and the Temple Cemetery is on those grounds. Simply follow the signs to the sanctuary and park there. There's ample parking. The cemetery is within sight and very visible. Later today, the family is indicated there will be a meal of condolence. It'll be at the West End Cultural Center, and it'll be at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The family will not be sitting Shiva. The opportunity to see the family really will be today at 2, and of course afterwards as well, as you carry back on your lives and engage to comfort the mourners. As Leonard indicated, down the road there will be a huge celebration of life for Mitch Podolak, and of course we'll all be welcome to see each other there as well. So right now, please stand for the El Male Rachamim.
We are an ancient people. We are acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. The centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamedromim, Ametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashina, Im Kedoshim Uktorim, Kezor Arakia Masirim, Et Nishmat Melech Ben Noach V'Riva Resel Shalach Le'olamo Biala Rachamim Yaskiraihu Beseter Knafav Le'olamim V'Yitzror Achayim Et Nishmatu Adonai hu nechalato Ve'yanuach neshalom al mishkavo v'nomar
Please remain standing and ask the pallbearers to come to the front and take your places. You can now proceed.